Hello everyone, I am very glad that you're joining this story. Subscribe, like and comment. Enjoy the story, smile more often.
When I checked my credit report for the first time, I thought there had to be a mistake. A car loan in my name? Payments overdue? I didn't even own a car. But when I confronted my parents, the truth they revealed wasn't just shocking. It was infuriating. They'd used my credit score to buy my brother a car, and their excuse? It was for the greater good. It was a quiet Monday evening when I sat down with the pile of mail that had been accumulating on my kitchen counter. Most of it was the usual mix of junk flyers and utility bills. But one envelope stood out. A crisp white envelope with the logo of a bank I didn't recognize. Curious, I opened it and started reading. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. The letter mentioned a car loan under my name with overdue payments and warned that my credit score could be severely impacted if the issue wasn't resolved soon. My immediate reaction was confusion. I didn't have a car loan. I didn't even own a car. I'd been saving up for months to buy one outright, determined to avoid the hassle of financing or monthly payments. For a moment, I convinced myself it was some kind of scam. Maybe someone was fishing for information or using scare tactics to get me to call a fake number. But the letter looked legitimate, and the tone was far too specific to dismiss entirely. Against my better judgment, a pit of unease began forming in my stomach. Unable to let it go, I decided to dig deeper. I'd heard that your credit report could show all active accounts tied to your name. So I signed up for a credit monitoring service and nervously pulled up my report. As the page loaded, I held my breath, hoping it would prove the letter was just a misunderstanding. But there it was. Listed under open accounts was a car loan opened 6 months ago, complete with the loan amount and monthly payment details. My social security number and personal information were attached to it, as if I had willingly signed the agreement. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. This wasn't a mistake. Someone had taken out a car loan in my name without my knowledge or consent. My first thought was, who could have done this? My second thought was, how did they get my information? I went through every possibility in my head. Could my personal data have been stolen in a breach? Had someone hacked into my accounts? But none of that made sense. I didn't live a high-risk lifestyle. I was careful about my information. The only people who had consistent access to my social security card and birth certificate were my parents. The thought stopped me in my tracks. I didn't want to believe it. My parents had always been supportive, at least in their own way. They weren't the type to do something like this. Or were they? The next morning, I decided to call the bank that issued the loan. After navigating an endless maze of automated menus, I finally got through to a customer service representative. I explained the situation, keeping my voice calm despite the anger bubbling beneath the surface. I don't recall ever taking out a car loan, I said. But my name is on one, and I need to figure out how this happened. The representative asked for some details, including my name, social security number, and address. After a few moments of typing, they confirmed the account. Yes, the loan is active, she said. It was opened 6 months ago. Would you like me to send you a copy of the original loan documents? Yes, please, I replied, my voice trembling. Can you tell me anything about the loan in the meantime? I'm afraid I can only share limited information over the phone, she said. But I can confirm it's for a vehicle, a used car finance for 36 months. The payments are overdue by 2 months. My stomach churned. Can you tell me the name on the title of the car? I asked, hoping to uncover another piece of the puzzle. She hesitated. I'm sorry, but that information isn't available to me. You'll have to wait for the documents to arrive. I thanked her and hung up, my mind racing. A 2-month delinquency on payments? That meant whoever had taken out the loan had not only stolen my identity, but had also failed to keep up with the payments, putting my credit at risk. By the time I got home from work that evening, I couldn't hold back my suspicions any longer. I called my mom. She was the only person who might have had access to my personal documents, and the timing seemed too coincidental. Hey, Mom, I said, try to keep my voice casual. I got a weird letter from a bank about a car loan. Do you know anything about that? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Oh, that, she said finally, her tone strangely calm. Yeah, your dad and I used your credit score to help your brother get a car. I froze. You what? Well, we didn't think you'd mind, she said, her tone defensive now. Your brother needed the car for work, and our credit wasn't good enough to get the loan approved. Yours was the best option. You used my social security number without asking me? I said, my voice rising. Do you know what kind of trouble this could cause me? Don't overreact, she said sharply. It's just a loan. We're going to pay it off eventually. Eventually? I repeated, disbelief washing over me. This isn't just about the money. This could ruin my credit score, Mom. Why didn't you at least tell me? We didn't think it was a big deal, she said, brushing off my concerns. It was for the greater good. Your brother needed help, and we did what we had to do. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My parents had always emphasized the importance of responsibility and honesty. Yet here they were, using my credit without permission and justifying it with the flimsiest of excuses. That night, I lay awake in bed, my mind replaying the conversation over and over. My parents' betrayal wasn't just about the loan, it was about trust. And as I stared at the ceiling, I realized that trust might never fully recover. The call to my parents was inevitable. After confirming with the bank that the car loan in my name was real, I knew I had to get answers. My gut told me they were involved. Who else could have accessed my personal information? Still, I clung to a shred of hope that there was some kind of misunderstanding. I paced my small living room as the phone rang. When my mom picked up, I wasted no time. "Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "do you know anything about a car loan in my name?" There was a pause, a long, suffocating silence that stretched just long enough to confirm what I already suspected. "Oh, that," she said finally, her tone casual, almost dismissive. "Yeah, we needed to get your brother a car for work, and your credit score was the best option." I stopped pacing, frozen in place. "You what?" I said, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and disbelief. "Calm down," she said, her tone shifting to one of annoyance. "We didn't think it was a big deal. Your dad and I couldn't qualify for the loan because of our credit, and your brother really needed the car. This way, everyone wins." "Everyone wins?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You used my credit without asking me. That's identity theft, Mom. Do you even understand what you've done?" "Don't be so dramatic," she said, brushing off my words. "We're your parents. It's not like we're strangers stealing your identity. It's just a loan, and we'll pay it off eventually. You're not even using your credit right now, so it's not like it's hurting you." "It is hurting me?" I shouted, unable to contain my anger any longer. "The payments are overdue, Mom. I'm getting letters from the bank saying my credit score is going to tank if this isn't resolved. Do you have any idea how hard it is to fix that once it's damaged?" She sighed, the exasperation in her voice only fueling my frustration. "You're overreacting," she said. "This was for the greater good. Your brother needed the car to get to work, and we didn't have another option. You'll understand when you're older." Her condescending tone made my blood boil. "Don't patronize me," I said sharply. "I'm not a child, and this isn't something I'm going to just understand someday. You stole from me, plain and simple. You didn't even bother to ask." "We didn't ask because we knew you'd say no," she snapped back. "And honestly, that would have been selfish of you. Your brother needed help, and we're a family. Families help each other." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "This isn't help," I said, my voice trembling. "This is manipulation. You decided what was best for everyone without giving me a choice, and now I'm the one paying the price." "Look," she said, clearly growing impatient, "your brother's job is helping support this family. If he couldn't get to work, we'd all be in trouble. This wasn't just about him. It was about all of us." "That doesn't make it okay," I said, my anger giving way to exhaustion. "You put my financial future at risk. And for what? A car? How do you expect me to trust you after this?" She didn't answer right away. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer, almost pleading. "We'll make it right," she said. "We'll catch up on the payments, and your credit will be fine. Just give us a little time." Her words did little to reassure me. "Time isn't going to fix the fact that you went behind my back," I said. "This isn't just about the money, Mom. It's about trust. You've broken that, and I don't know if it can be repaired." "Don't be so dramatic," she said again, her voice hardening. "You're acting like we've ruined your life. We're your parents. We've always done what's best for you and your brother. This is no different." Her refusal to take responsibility was the final straw. "This isn't what's best for me," I said, my voice firm. "This is what was convenient for you. And if you think I'm going to let this slide, you're dead wrong." I hung up before she could respond, my hands shaking with a mix of anger and disbelief. For years, I trusted my parents, believing they had my best interests at heart. Now, that trust felt irreparably shattered. As I sat on the couch, staring at the letter from the bank, I realized this was only the beginning. My parents might have justified their actions as being for the greater good, but the damage they'd done was undeniable. I had to figure out how to clean up their mess before it ruined my future. I couldn't let it go. The phrase "for the greater good" was ringing in my ears, each repetition making me angrier. As soon as I hung up with my mom, I called back, refusing to let her dismiss my concerns so easily. This time, my dad answered the phone, his tone already tinged with irritation. "What now?" he said. I need an explanation, I said firmly. How is ruining my credit supposed to be for the greater good? Do you even understand the consequences of what you've done? My dad sighed, the sound patronizing. Oh, come on, he said. You're not even using your credit right now. It's not like you're trying to buy a house or take out a loan. We'll pay it off eventually. This isn't as big of a deal as you're making it out to be. The nonchalance in his voice made my blood boil. Eventually, I shouted, do you even hear yourself? What if I wanted to buy a car? What if I needed a loan? My credit score is already taking a hit because of this, and the longer this drags on, the worse it'll get. You've put me in a terrible position for your own convenience. Stop yelling, he said, his tone hardening. We didn't do this to hurt you. Your brother needed the car for work, and we didn't have another option. This was the best solution for everyone. Sometimes you have to make sacrifices for family. Sacrifices? I repeated, incredulous. No one asked you to sacrifice anything. You decided I was the one who had to pay the price, and you didn't even bother to tell me. You're being dramatic, my mom chimed in, having apparently been listening on speakerphone. This isn't the end of the world. Your brother is contributing to the household now because of that car. If he couldn't get to work, we'd all be in a much worse situation. You should be grateful we found a way to handle it. Grateful? I snapped, my voice trembling with anger. You didn't find a way to handle it. You found a way to dump the problem on me. And you're acting like that's perfectly fine. The more they tried to justify their actions, the angrier I became. It was clear they didn't grasp or didn't care about the gravity of what they'd done. Do you even realize how hard it is to repair a credit score once it's damaged? I said, this could affect me for years, all because you couldn't find another way to buy a car for Ryan. And now you're acting like I'm the one being unreasonable. You're blowing this out of proportion, my dad said, his tone dismissive. We're your parents. We've done so much for you over the years, and this is how you repay us? By throwing a tantrum over a car loan. The audacity of his words left me speechless for a moment. When I finally found my voice, it was icy. Don't turn this around on me, I said. This isn't about gratitude. This is about trust. You've proven I can't trust you with something as important as my credit. And now you're trying to make me feel guilty for being upset? That's not going to work. Trust, my mom said, her voice rising. We're your parents. Everything we've done has been for your benefit. We raised you, supported you, and gave you a good life. The least you can do is help out when we need it. Help out? I said, my voice trembling. You didn't ask for my help. You stole it. There's a difference, and you know it. The conversation ended in a stalemate, with both of them insisting I was overreacting. But their excuses and justifications only solidified my resolve. They might have thought they were doing what was best for the family, but the truth was they were doing what was easiest for them, regardless of the cost to me. That night, I sat down with the letters from the bank, my credit report, and the notes I'd taken during my earlier call with the loan company. The mess they created was mine to clean up, and I didn't trust them to fix it. As I stared at the paperwork, a bitter thought crossed my mind. If this was what family meant to them, then maybe I needed to start redefining what family meant to me. I knew the next step had to be a conversation with my brother, Ryan. While I was furious with my parents for putting me in this position, I needed to know what role he had played in the situation. Deep down, I hoped he'd been left in the dark, unaware of how the car had been financed. That hope was the only thing tempering my frustration as I dialed his number. Hey, he answered, his voice casual and upbeat. Ryan, I said, skipping pleasantries. We need to talk. It's about your car. There was a pause, and his tone shifted. Okay, what about it? Did you know it's in my name? I asked, keeping my voice as steady as I could. There was another pause, longer this time. What do you mean in your name? He asked, though his voice sounded more defensive than confused. I mean the loan, I said. The one Mom and Dad took out. It's in my name. They used my credit score to finance your car without asking me. And now the payments are overdue. His silence spoke volumes. I didn't know, he said finally, his voice quieter. I wanted to believe him, but I couldn't let it go. You didn't know? Are you sure? Because this loan has been active for 6 months. That's a long time for you not to notice anything. Ryan hesitated, then sighed. Okay, I didn't know at first, he admitted. Mom and Dad told me they had everything handled. But when I saw the paperwork a couple of months ago, I realized it was in your name. I clenched my fists, struggling to keep my temper in check. And you didn't think to tell me? I didn't want to cause trouble, he said, avoiding my question. They said they'd take care of it soon, and I figured they'd already talked to you about it. I didn't think it was my place to say anything. His explanation only fueled my frustration. Ryan, you've been driving that car for months, knowing the loan was in my name and that I didn't know about it. Do you have any idea how much trouble this has caused me? I know, he said, his voice soft. And I'm sorry. I should have said something sooner. I didn't want to get involved. That's the problem, I snapped. You are involved. Whether you wanted to be or not, you're part of this. That car is yours, but I'm the one who's dealing with the consequences. Do you even realize what that means? I do now, he said, sounding genuinely remorseful. Look, if there's anything I can do to help fix this, just tell me. I'll do whatever it takes. I wanted to believe him, but his words felt hollow. The damage had already been done, and no apology or offer to help could undo what I was going through. Why didn't you just ask Mom and Dad to put it in their name? I asked, my voice quieter now. Why use mine? They said their credit wasn't good enough, he admitted, and I didn't have enough credit history to qualify on my own. They said yours was the only option. I didn't know what else to do. I sighed, rubbing my temples as the weight of the situation pressed down on me. This isn't just about the car, I said. This is about trust. Mom and Dad used my name without asking me, and now I find out you've known about it for months and didn't think I deserved to know. Do you have any idea how that feels? I'm sorry, he said again, his voice barely above a whisper. Sorry doesn't fix my credit score, I replied. Sorry doesn't stop the letters from the bank or the phone calls from debt collectors. And sorry sure as hell doesn't make me trust you or them again. Ryan didn't respond. As angry as I was, I couldn't bring myself to stay mad at him for long. He was young, barely out of college, and I could tell he was just as much a pawn in my parents' scheme as I was. But unlike him, I was the one left to clean up the mess they'd made. I don't know how we're going to fix this, I said finally, my voice tired. But I can't do it alone. If you're serious about helping, I'll hold you to it. But you need to understand this isn't something I'll just get over. I get it, he said, and I'll do whatever I can to help. I mean it. I hung up the phone feeling no better than I had before the conversation started. Ryan's remorse was genuine, but it didn't change the fact that everyone in my family, except me, had been complicit in this mess. As I stared at the letters from the bank piled on my coffee table, I realized this wasn't just about the car anymore. It was about boundaries, trust, and the limits of what I was willing to forgive. And in that moment, I wasn't sure those limits could stretch much further. The fallout started slowly, with a single letter arriving in the mail a week after my conversation with Ryan. The envelope was marked with bold, red lettering. Final notice. Inside, the letter detailed the overdue payments on the car loan, warning me that if the balance wasn't brought current, the account would be sent to collections. I sat at my kitchen table, the letter trembling in my hands. My name was printed at the top of the page, right next to the words account holder, making it painfully clear who the bank would hold responsible. I wasn't just an uninvolved victim of my parents' scheme. I was the one on the hook for their financial irresponsibility. Over the next few days, the situation escalated. Letters from the bank started arriving every other day, each one more urgent than the last. Then the phone calls began. At first, I ignored them, too angry and overwhelmed to deal with the debt collectors. But eventually, the stress became unbearable, and I had no choice but to pick up the phone. Hello, is this my name? A stern voice asked. Yes, this is my name, I said hesitantly. This is a courtesy call regarding your delinquent car loan. The account is currently 2 months overdue, and failure to resolve the balance may result in the loan being sent to collections. I gripped the phone tightly, feeling a wave of anger and helplessness. I didn't take out that loan, I said, my voice shaking. It was opened in my name without my permission. The collector paused, their tones softening slightly. I understand your frustration, they said, but as the account holder of record, you're legally responsible for the balance. If you believe this account was opened fraudulently, you'll need to file a police report and submit it to the bank's fraud department. The words hit me like a ton of bricks. A police report? Against my own parents? The thought was unbearable, but the alternative, allowing the debt to ruin my credit, was just as unthinkable. Hoping to avoid such drastic measures, I called my parents again that evening. My dad answered this time, and I wasted no time getting to the point. You need to fix this, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Now, the bank is threatening to send the loan to collections. Do you have any idea what that means for me? We're working on it, he said, his tone clipped. We just need a little more time. Time isn't something I have, I shouted, my frustration boiling over. My credit score has already dropped because of this. If this goes to collections, it'll ruin my financial future. You need to make this right immediately. He sighed heavily, as if I were the one being unreasonable. Look, we're doing the best we can, he said. Things are tight right now, but we'll catch up on the payments. You just have to be patient. Patient? I repeated, my voice trembling with anger. You're asking me to be patient while my credit is destroyed and debt collectors call me every day? This isn't just a little inconvenience for me, Dad. It's my entire future you're gambling with. He didn't respond right away, and when he finally did, his tone was dismissive. You're overreacting, he said. This will blow over soon. Just stop worrying about it so much. His refusal to take responsibility was the final straw. That night, as I sat alone in my apartment surrounded by letters from the bank, I realized I couldn't rely on my parents to fix this. Their excuses, their empty promises. It was all just a way to delay the inevitable. The stress was taking a toll on my mental health. I couldn't sleep, couldn't focus at work, and every time my phone rang, my heart raced, dreading another call from the debt collectors. The weight of the situation felt unbearable, and for the first time in my life, I truly understood the meaning of financial vulnerability. I knew I had to take action, even if it meant going against my parents. The idea of filing a police report was still terrifying, but I started researching my options. Could I dispute the loan with the bank? Could I force my parents to transfer the debt into their names? Every solution seemed complicated and exhausting, but I had no choice. The anger and betrayal I felt toward my parents only grew with each passing day. They'd put me in this position, but I was the one paying the price. And as much as I wanted to believe they'd eventually make things right, their actions, or lack thereof, had shown me I couldn't count on them. This was my mess now, and I had to find a way to clean it up before it ruined my life entirely. Months passed, and the weight of the situation grew heavier with each overdue notice, each phone call from the bank. My parents' empty promises to fix it soon had turned into avoidance, with them dodging my calls or brushing me off when I tried to confront them. I realized I couldn't wait any longer. My credit score was sinking further into the red, and the bank was on the verge of sending the loan to collections. I knew I had to take control of the situation, even if it meant going against the very people who had caused it. One sleepless night, I opened my laptop and began researching my options. I learned that because the loan was opened in my name without my explicit consent, I could potentially dispute it as identity theft. The process wasn't simple. It required filing a police report, submitting detailed evidence to the bank, and potentially involving lawyers. But as daunting as it sounded, it felt like the only way to protect myself. When I first mentioned the idea of filing a police report to my parents, their reactions were predictably defensive. I called them one evening, my tone firm and unwavering. I've been doing some research, I began. If you won't fix this, I'll have to report the loan as identity theft. What are you talking about? My mom snapped. Identity theft? We're your parents. This isn't identity theft. It's family business. Family business? I repeated, incredulous. You took out a loan in my name without my permission. That's the definition of identity theft, Mom. It doesn't matter if we're related. My dad chimed in, his tone dismissive. You're being ridiculous. Filing a police report against your own parents? Do you even hear yourself? What kind of person does that? The kind of person who has no other choice, I said. You've had months to fix this, and all you've done is make excuses. I can't wait anymore. When I mentioned the word police, my mom's tone changed entirely. You'd throw your own parents under the bus? She asked, her voice breaking. After everything we've done for you? We raised you, supported you, and this is how you repay us. Her attempt to guilt me only solidified my resolve. You threw me under the bus first, I shot back. You didn't think twice about using my credit without asking me. Why should I protect you now when you didn't care about protecting me? Tears filled her voice as she tried a different angle. We were just trying to help your brother, she pleaded. It wasn't malicious. It was a mistake. Do you really want to ruin this family over a car? This family? I said, my voice trembling with anger. You ruined this family the moment you decided my future was less important than Ryan's convenience. This isn't about a car. It's about trust, and you've completely destroyed mine. Her sobs grew louder, but I refused to let her manipulation sway me. If you care about this family, I said coldly, then you'll figure out how to fix this before I have to take legal action. Because once I file that report, there's no going back. It was one of the hardest decisions I'd ever made, but I knew it was the right one. The thought of involving law enforcement against my own parents made me sick to my stomach, but the alternative, allowing them to continue exploiting my credit, was even worse. Over the next few weeks, I gathered every piece of evidence I could find. The letters from the bank, my credit report, and the notes I'd taken from every phone call I'd had with them. I contacted a lawyer, who confirmed that I had a strong case for disputing the loan as fraudulent. Still, the emotional toll of the situation weighed heavily on me. Every step felt like a betrayal, even though I was the one who had been wronged. I couldn't help but wonder how things had gotten so bad, how the people I'd trusted most in the world had put me in this position. Despite the pain, I pushed forward. I filed the police report, submitted the evidence to the bank's fraud department, and waited for the next steps. It wasn't easy, and it certainly wasn't quick, but for the first time, I felt like I was taking control of my own life. My parents' reactions ranged from anger to sorrow to outright denial. They couldn't believe I'd followed through, but I knew I couldn't let their guilt trips dictate my actions anymore. This wasn't just about fixing my credit. It was about standing up for myself and refusing to let anyone take advantage of me, even if they were family. The fallout from my decision to take legal action hit harder and faster than I expected. Within days of filing the police report, my parents knew what I'd done, and their reaction was as explosive as I'd feared. My mom called me first. Her voice was a mix of fury and heartbreak. "How could you do this to us?" she demanded. "You filed a police report against your own family? What kind of person does that?" "The kind of person who was left with no other choice," I replied, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat. "I gave you months to fix this, and you didn't. What did you expect me to do? Sit back and let you ruin my future? You're being so selfish," she snapped. "Do you know what this is doing to your father and me? We're your parents. We've sacrificed so much for you, and this is how you repay us." I clenched my fist, trying to keep my anger in check. "Sacrifices don't justify what you did," I said firmly. "You used my credit without asking, left me to deal with the consequences, and then ignored every chance I gave you to make it right. This isn't about repayment. This is about accountability." The guilt trips didn't stop with my parents. Word spread quickly among our extended family, and soon I was fielding calls and messages from aunts, uncles, and cousins who all had opinions about the situation. "I heard what happened," one aunt said, her tone disapproving. "Don't you think you're taking this too far? It's just a car loan. Family is supposed to stick together, no matter what." I stuck together for months. I shot back. I gave them every opportunity to fix this, and they didn't. What else was I supposed to do? Another cousin was more supportive. "Honestly, I don't blame you," she said. "Your parents put you in an impossible position. You have every right to stand up for yourself." The divide within the family became glaringly obvious. Some sided with me, arguing that my parents had crossed a line by using my credit without permission. Others took my parents' side, insisting that family loyalty should come before everything else. "Blood is thicker than water," one uncle said during a particularly heated phone call. "So is debt," I replied, cutting the conversation short. Ryan, to his credit, stood firmly in my corner. He called me shortly after the news broke, his voice apologetic but supportive. "I'm so sorry you're dealing with this," he said. "They put you in an impossible situation, and you're just doing what you have to do." "Thanks, Ryan," I said, my voice softening. "I appreciate you saying that. It means a lot." "I mean it," he continued. "I know Mom and Dad are mad, but they did this to themselves. You didn't ask for any of this, and it's not fair for them to expect you to just roll over and take it." His words were a rare source of comfort during a difficult time. While I knew he couldn't undo the damage our parents had caused, his support made me feel less alone. Still, the situation took its toll on our family dynamic. Holiday gatherings became tense and awkward, with my parents refusing to speak to me unless absolutely necessary. Conversations that used to be light and cheerful were now laced with passive-aggressive comments and pointed remarks about loyalty and family values. I tried to remind myself that their anger was a reflection of their own guilt, but it didn't make their words hurt any less. Despite the emotional strain, I refused to let their manipulation dictate my actions any longer. Filing the police report was one of the hardest decisions I'd ever made, but it was also the most empowering. For the first time, I was standing up for myself and refusing to let anyone, not even my parents, take advantage of me. As the weeks turned into months, I began to see the ripple effects of my decision. My parents eventually started making payments on the loan, likely out of fear of the legal consequences. The bank removed the delinquent marks from my credit report, and my score slowly began to recover. But the damage to our family couldn't be undone. My parents saw my actions as a betrayal, while I saw theirs as an unforgivable breach of trust. The divide between us was deep and painful, and I wasn't sure if it could ever be bridged. Even so, I felt a sense of relief knowing that I'd taken control of my life. For years, I let my parents' expectations and decisions shape my path, but now I was finally carving out a future on my own terms. And no matter how much they tried to guilt me, I knew I'd made the right choice. The road to fixing the mess my parents had created was long and exhausting. Filing the police report had been the first step, but it was far from the last. The bank's fraud department needed mountains of paperwork, copies of the report, evidence of my parents' involvement, and countless forms to dispute the loan. Each interaction was a stark reminder of the trust that had been broken. My lawyer was patient but firm, guiding me through the legal and financial maze. "This isn't going to be quick," she said during our first meeting. "But if we stay persistent, we can get the loan out of your name." It took months, but eventually the bank agreed to transfer the loan to my parents. The late payments were no longer tied to my credit report, and the looming threat of collections faded. While it was a relief to finally be free of the financial burden, the damage to my credit score had already been done. Repairing my credit became another uphill battle. I signed up for credit monitoring services, paid down other small debts, and carefully followed my lawyer's advice to dispute any lingering inaccuracies. Progress was slow, but seeing my score inch higher each month felt like reclaiming a part of myself that had been taken away. Still, the financial damage was only part of the story. The emotional toll of the ordeal weighed heavily on me, even after the legal issues were resolved. My relationship with my parents was strained to the breaking point. They saw my actions as a betrayal, and while they begrudgingly took responsibility for the loan, they refused to acknowledge the harm they'd caused me. "We're still your parents," my mom said during one of our increasingly rare phone calls. "We made a mistake, but you didn't have to escalate it like this. You've changed." Her words cut deep, but I held my ground. "I've changed because I had to," I replied. "You forced me to stand up for myself when you wouldn't. That's not something I can just forget." Therapy became a lifeline as I worked through the complex emotions of betrayal, guilt, and anger. My therapist helped me unpack the conflicting feelings I had toward my parents, love for the people who raised me, but resentment for the choices they'd made. "Setting boundaries doesn't mean you love them any less," my therapist said during one session. "It means you're protecting yourself, and that's okay." It was a lesson I clung to as I began to rebuild my life. I started saying no more often, refusing to let my parents guilt me into compromising my well-being. The old patterns of manipulation and obligation no longer had power over me, and I learned to prioritize my own needs for the first time in years. While the distance between us was painful, it was also liberating. I realized that I didn't have to sacrifice my happiness to maintain a relationship with my parents, and I could love them from afar without compromising my own boundaries. As the months turned into a year, I started to feel the weight of the ordeal lift. My credit was slowly recovering, my anxiety was lessening, and I was rediscovering parts of myself I'd forgotten. The experience had been harrowing, but it had also made me stronger, teaching me the importance of standing up for myself, even when it meant standing alone. Ryan remained a source of support, though our relationship had its own complications. He felt guilty for benefiting from the car, even after the loan was transferred to my parents. "I still feel like I should have done more," he said during one conversation. "You've already done enough," I told him. "You backed me when no one else did. That means more to me than anything." Our bond deepened through the ordeal, but the same couldn't be said for my parents. Each interaction with them was tinged with tension and unspoken resentment. They hadn't apologized for their actions, and I knew they never would. Despite everything, I found peace in knowing I had reclaimed control of my life. The scars of the betrayal were still there, but they no longer defined me. I was moving forward one step at a time, and I was finally learning what it meant to put myself first. Years passed, and the wounds from the car loan fiasco slowly scarred over, though they never fully healed. My relationship with my parents remained distant at best. We spoke occasionally, mostly out of obligation, but the closeness we once had was gone. Their refusal to apologize or acknowledge the harm they caused made it impossible to move forward. One day, seemingly out of nowhere, my mom called me with a tone of forced sweetness that immediately put me on edge. "We need to talk about something important," she said, her voice dripping with anticipation. "What is it?" I asked cautiously. "It's about Uncle Harold's estate," she said. "He passed away a few months ago, and he left a significant inheritance to the family. Your dad and I have been thinking about how we should divide it." The mention of an inheritance caught me off guard. Uncle Harold had been a distant relative I barely knew, and the idea of him leaving money to our family was unexpected. Still, I could already sense where this conversation was headed, and it wasn't anywhere good. "We think it would be fair if you shared your portion with us," my mom continued. "After all, your father and I have done so much for you over the years. It's only right that we all benefit equally." I couldn't help but laugh, though there was no humor in it. "You've already taken enough from me," I said, my voice calm but firm. "Why should I share anything with you?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line before she spoke again. "That's not fair," she said, her tone defensive. "We're a family. Everything we do is for the greater good. We supported you through thick and thin, and this is how you repay us." I rolled my eyes at the familiar refrain. "You didn't support me," I said, my voice sharp. "You used me. You put me in debt without my permission, and you didn't care about the consequences. Now you expect me to just hand over money like nothing ever happened?" "No, Mom. Not this time." The conversation quickly escalated, with my mom pulling every guilt-tripping trick in the book. She brought up old memories, emphasizing the sacrifices she and my dad had made to raise me. "We gave you everything we could," she said, her voice quivering with emotion. "And now you're turning your back on us?" "You didn't give me everything," I shot back. "You took from me when it was convenient for you, and you've never once apologized for it. If anyone turned their back on family, it was you." My dad eventually joined the call, chiming in with his own brand of manipulation. "You're being selfish," he said bluntly. "This isn't just about money. It's about family loyalty. If we can't rely on each other, what do we have?" "You don't get to lecture me about loyalty," I said, my anger simmering beneath the surface. "Loyalty goes both ways, and you broke mine a long time ago. If you want to share the inheritance, you'll have to look somewhere else." For the first time in my life, I stood my ground without wavering. Their attempts to guilt me, manipulate me, and frame the situation as a moral failing on my part fell flat. I'd heard it all before, and I wasn't about to fall into the same trap again. The conversation ended with them calling me cold and ungrateful, but I didn't care. I'd spent too many years carrying the weight of their decisions, and I wasn't about to let them burden me again. In the days that followed, I reflected on how much I'd grown. The younger version of me would have folded under the pressure, desperate to please them and avoid conflict. But now, I felt a sense of strength and independence that I'd never known before. The inheritance debate was a bittersweet moment, a reminder of how fractured our family had become. But it was also a turning point, a reaffirmation that I was no longer willing to compromise my values or well-being for the sake of appeasing others. I used my portion of the inheritance to continue rebuilding my financial stability, investing in my future on my own terms. And for the first time, I felt truly free from the shadow of my parents' expectations. Today, as I sit in my home office with the sunlight streaming through the windows, I reflect on the journey that brought me here. It's been years since the ordeal with my parents, and though the experience left scars, it also shaped me into the person I am now. I've worked tirelessly to rebuild my credit, establish financial stability, and create a future that's mine and mine alone. Rebuilding my credit was no small feat after the car loan was transferred out of my name. I dedicated myself to making every financial decision with care and precision. I paid down old debts, built up an emergency fund, and even managed to qualify for a low-interest credit card to help repair my score. Each step was a victory, a reminder that I could take control of my life despite the obstacles that had been thrown my way. Eventually, I reached a place where I no longer worried about the past dragging me down. I bought a car in my own name, a milestone that felt especially sweet after everything I'd been through. And with careful planning, I've started saving for a home, something I once thought would be impossible after the financial damage my parents caused. Ryan and I remain close, though the events of those years left an indelible mark on our relationship. He still carries a sense of guilt for benefiting from the car loan, even though I've told him countless times that he wasn't to blame. "You were a kid," I remind him whenever the topic comes up. "They put both of us in impossible positions. The important thing is that you stood by me when it mattered." His support during that time strengthened our bond in ways I hadn't anticipated. He's become one of my closest confidants, someone I can rely on for advice and encouragement. It's a bittersweet contrast to my relationship with our parents, which has remained distant at best. My mom occasionally tries to reconnect, though her attempts feel more like obligations than genuine efforts. "You don't visit as much as you used to," she said during one phone call, her tone tinged with passive aggressiveness. "I'm busy," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "Work's been demanding." The truth is, I made a conscious choice to limit my interactions with them. Every conversation seems to circle back to their old justifications, their refusal to acknowledge the harm they caused. I've realized I can't change them, and I've stopped trying. Through therapy and self-reflection, I've learned to make peace with the past. My parents' actions no longer define me or my future. Instead, they serve as lessons, hard-earned reminders of the importance of boundaries, self-respect, and standing up for myself. I've built a network of friends and mentors who feel more like family than my parents ever did. They celebrate my successes, support me in my struggles, and never ask for more than I can give. For the first time, I feel surrounded by people who value me for who I am, not for what I can do for them. Looking back, I don't regret the decisions I made to protect myself, even though they came with painful consequences. Cutting ties, setting boundaries, and prioritizing my own well-being were acts of self-preservation that allowed me to move forward. Today, I'm free from the guilt, the manipulation, and the weight of their expectations. That freedom is worth more than any inheritance, more than any apology they might offer, and more than the approval I once desperately sought. I've reclaimed my life, and I'm proud of the person I've become. The road here wasn't easy, but it was worth it. And for the first time in years, I can truly say I'm happy.